Everything shifts for Warren Buffett after hitting $20,000. Imagine a rocket on a launch pad. For a few precious seconds, it fights the thickest part of the atmosphere. Every ounce of fuel is consumed just to overcome gravity. If the first stage falters, the whole mission fails before it leaves the ground. That is the moment most people never talk about, the initial escape from being grounded. In personal finance, that moment isn't $1 million or an early retirement windfall. It's a comparatively modest, humbling, powerful sum, $20,000. Cross that line, and the physics of your financial life change. Everything shifts. Chapter 1. The Gravity Well. Before someone hits that threshold, life is lived inside a gravity well. Small shocks pull you straight back down, and they multiply. A flat tire that costs $300 is not just an inconvenience. It becomes the decision between eating well for a week or sliding a credit card across the counter. A medical bill of $600 morphs into a payday loan at 300% interest because you need cash now, and the clock won't wait. Missed dentist appointments, deferred oil changes, and broken-down refrigerators accumulate in ways that are both material and psychological. You're not poor because of character defects. You're strapped because small failures cascade when the buffer doesn't exist. Think about a typical month for someone with less than $1,000 saved. An unplanned bill of $500 forces urgent choices. Skip rent, borrow from a friend, take on a high-interest loan, or sell something that was supposed to be long-term. That urgency scrambles priorities. It makes you reactive, not strategic. You are constantly solving the next crisis instead of building the next advantage. The reason this matters is not just money, it's bandwidth. Scarcity consumes cognitive resources. When your finances are fragile, you do not see options clearly. You see danger signs. You react. You ration attention for survival. That scarcity loop is brutal because it prevents the very actions that would break the loop. That is why the first $20,000 is the hardest. Not because it's impossible, but because every month below it, the world presses you down. You have to climb with one hand tied behind your back. Once you brew enough momentum, once you get out of that thick air, the climb becomes less punishing. The rocket no longer needs every ounce of thrust to keep from falling. It can start to climb and plan for higher orbits. Chapter 2. Refusal Power. Jack versus Mike. Let me tell you two short stories. They are simple, but the difference between them is the difference between being a passenger in your life and being the pilot. Jack is real in the ways most of us are. He makes a steady income, rents a modest apartment, and lives paycheck to paycheck. One week, his car dies. He works a few extra shifts, borrows $400 from a friend, and pays it back slowly. Interest in the form of favors and sleepless nights. 2 months later, his landlord mentions that rent might rise. Jack's immediate thought is panic. He takes a second job delivering pizza, sleeps less, eats cheaper, and says yes to every overtime request, even when the job makes him miserable. He can't say no to his cousin who needs help because he's afraid of burning bridges. He can't negotiate terms with vendors or employers because any risk feels existential. Mike looks similar on paper. Same income bracket, same neighborhood. The difference, he has a cushion of $20,000. When his car dies, he doesn't panic. He schedules repairs, discusses options with a mechanic, and chooses a reliable fix rather than a temporary patch. When the landlord mentions a rent increase, Mike negotiates calmly. When his cousin asks to borrow money for a business idea that smells shaky, Mike listens, asks questions, and says no without humiliation. He can walk away from a bad job offer. He can take a short-term, lower-wage role that teaches a new skill. He sleeps. He takes care of his teeth. That capacity to say no, refusal power, is not glamorous. It is dignity, made practical. It is the ability to set boundaries and preserve optionality. With $20,000 in the bank, you can refuse the immediate lure of fix-it-now scams, predatory credit, and status-driven purchases. You can choose the path of long-term accumulation rather than reactive consumption. That altered posture changes relationships, negotiations, and opportunities. People treat you differently when you are not scared. Now, am I saying 20,000 solves every problem? Of course not. It doesn't eliminate unemployment or a severe health crisis. What it does is transform the ecosystem of everyday choices. The small, frequent traps that used to drag you backwards become manageable hurdles. You stop making decisions out of desperation. If you're under 20,000, mute the distractions and pay attention. Leave a comment telling me where you stand. $0, 1K, 1K, 10K, 10K, 20K, or 20K plus. It helps to name the starting line. Chapter 3. The Cognitive Payoff. Let's talk about science for a moment. Plainly, without jargon. Research on scarcity shows a dangerous pattern. When people are under financial stress, test scores on reasoning tasks drop. Participants who are worried about money perform worse on cognitive tests, as if anxiety took 10 to 20 IQ points off their effective performance. That isn't metaphor, it's measurable. Why does this happen? Because the mind has limited bandwidth. Financial urgency occupies that bandwidth. It creates tunnel vision. Decisions that would otherwise be simple, like whether to take a free skill class or a second job, become fraught. You trade long-term strategy for immediate survival. The result is decisions that, in aggregate, keep you trapped. Hitting the $20,000 mark buys you back that bandwidth. Suddenly, planning returns. You can evaluate opportunities with curiosity instead of fear. That is as consequential as earning a raise. It is perhaps even more consequential because it changes how you engage with the raise when it comes. With cognitive bandwidth restored, you can invest in learning, negotiate better, and spot asymmetric opportunities that require thought, not just more hours. Chapter 4. A short math class. Why 20,000 matters. Now, let's get to what often gets misunderstood. Compound interest. People preach compound interest like it's a miracle, but it's not a magic trick. It's a law of accumulation. Its power depends on two things: time and principle. If you want velocity on a snowball, you either need a long hill or a bigger core. For most people, getting the core to a reasonable size matters more than squeezing a little extra percentage on small balances. Here's a simple rule to remember. The rule of 72. If you divide 72 by a rate of return, you get the approximate number of years it takes for an investment to double. So at a 10% return, your money doubles in about 7.2 years. At 7%, it doubles in roughly 10.3 years. That's not a promise. It's a mathematical approximation assuming steady returns, but it's useful for intuition. Now compare outcomes. Assume a 10% return for illustration. A $1,000 balance earning 10% yields about $100 in a year. That's helpful for short-term comfort, but it's not transformative. A $20,000 balance earning 10% yields $2,000 in a year, enough to cover a lot of the small emergencies we've been talking about, or to reinvest and speed up the snowball. Even at a more conservative 7%, $1,000 produces $70 in the first year, while $20,000 produces $1,400. Over time, that gap compounds to create a meaningful difference. The math is simple. Tenfold the principal, you get tenfold the income for any percentage return. That is why the core amount matters. You can't bootstrap to a meaningful compounding engine on a tiny balance, no matter how clever you try to be. Imagine the snowball metaphor more vividly. If you roll a dry snowball on a short patch of grass, it picks up a little fluff and stops. If you pack a wet, dense core and push it down a long hill, it grows exponentially. The wet core is your $20,000. Without it, you may roll and stall. With it, the hill of time and steady returns does the heavy lifting. Let's put that into a timeline. Suppose you have $20,000 and add nothing. At 7%, it doubles to about $40,000 in roughly 10 years. At 10%, it doubles to about $40,000 in a bit over 7 years. Now imagine you have $2,000 instead. At 7%, you double to $4,000 in 10 years. Helpful, but not life-changing. The time it takes to reach meaningful thresholds is dramatically shorter when you start with a larger principal. Why bring this up? Because too many people chase tiny percentage advantages on a small base, trying to find a 2% edge here, a marginally cheaper fund there, when they should be focused on building the base. Defense and accumulation beat clever returns when your snowball is still a pebble. Chapter 5. The First 20K. Tactics and Mental Models. Getting to $20,000 is not mystical. It is a mix of small habits, a few moments of restraint, and a tactical allocation once you reach the number. Think about the balance as a living thing. Part armor, part engine. I like to borrow a military metaphor. Part bulletproof vest, part soldiers. The vest is your emergency cash, money that's accessible, safe, and reliable when the body gets hit. The soldiers are your deployed investments, low-cost, broadly diversified vehicles that can fight for long-term growth. A practical split that makes sense for many is keep $5,000, $10,000 as the bulletproof vest and place $10,000 or $15,000 into longer-term, low-cost, broad market investments. The vest should be liquid, high-yield savings, a short-term government bond ladder, or similar instruments where principal is intact and accessible. The soldier money should be invested in broad exposure that you can leave to do its work. Low-cost, index-like vehicles that capture market growth without speculating on single names or complex securities. Why this split? Because the vest preserves refusal power. If your car dies or you lose a week of income, you can weather it without predatory credit. That restraint allows the soldiers to remain deployed and compound instead of being sold at the first sign of trouble. But the full playbook goes beyond splitting cash and investments. There are asymmetric bets you can make with limited downside and outsized upside. Investments in yourself. For the price of a single weekend course or a focused $1,000 boot camp, you can learn a high-value skill that leads to better projects, side gigs, or a pay bump. Unlike speculative market plays, investing in human capital compounds in a different way. New skills open doors, and those doors often pay over the long haul. The expected value of a well-chosen skill upgrade is often high relative to the cost, and it doesn't require leverage. Here's a concrete example. Spend $1,000 on a coding boot camp, a digital marketing course, or plumbing certification. If that course helps you earn an extra $300 a month through freelance gigs or a higher salary, the investment pays for itself in less than 4 months. That is asymmetric in your favor. Limited downside. the cost of the course, and potentially large upside. Permanent earnings increase. Repeated small wagers like that, combined with a steady savings plan, accelerate your path beyond the $20,000 core. Chapter 6, The Great Filter and the Crab Bucket. But there's a psychological and social gauntlet once you reach a certain level. Hitting $20,000 is an inflection point. It looms like a shiny gate that triggers both internal and external tests. People call this the Great Filter. It is a crucible where good intentions meet social pressure and personal temptation. First, the reward trap. After you save steadily and finally see 20 grand, it's tempting to reward yourself with something loud. A new car, a big vacation, or a house down payment that eats the whole cushion. Those purchases feel like trophies, but many are liabilities disguised as wins. Every dollar spent to validate status erodes refusal power and reopens the gravity well. Second, the crab bucket. We are social animals. Your circle, family, friends, colleagues, has expectations. When you change behavior, some will cheer, others will push back. There will be invitations to live it up, showy purchases to keep up appearances, or subtle social cues that celebrate consumption. The crab bucket pulls downward. If one crab tries to climb, the others tug it back. Discipline here becomes not just financial, but social labor. You must choose whether to preserve the seed or buy immediate approval. Discipline is the test of worthiness, not as moralizing judgment, but as a practical checkpoint. If you protect the seed and continue to invest, the snowball grows. If you spend it on status, you kill the chance of exponential growth because the core is gone. Chapter 7, The Death List. There are 3 pits I want to warn you about, the quicksand traps that can destroy your buffer overnight. I call them the death list. The first pit is leverage, borrowing to invest, using margin, borrowing to buy speculative assets, or taking on debt in expectation of a magical payday is a dangerous misalignment. Leverage amplifies gains, yes, but it amplifies losses far more quickly. For someone whose buffer is just $20,000, a single bad swing in a leverage play can erase years of effort. The second pit is complex derivatives and exotic financial instruments. These products are designed for professionals with deep understanding and capital to sustain volatility. They are not a path for someone building a foundation. Complexity hides hidden risks. What looks clever on paper can behave unpredictably in stress, and unpredictability is what destroys buffers. The third pit is buying a house too early. Home ownership can be a fine thing. Emotional stability, potential forced savings, and eventual equity. But the down payment and maintenance costs required to own a home can eat the $20,000 core. Closing costs, unexpected repairs, property taxes, and the inertia of a mortgage can trap you in place and drain flexibility. Buying a house on a thin down payment while still fragile often turns ownership into a liability rather than an asset. These are not moral pronouncements, they're practical warnings. Each of these pits destroys refusal power. If your buffer goes, so does your ability to say no, to negotiate, and to choose better opportunities. At this point, you might be asking, what does discipline look like in practice? How do you keep the seed and grow it without being ascetic or living under a rock? And how do you balance living now with building freedom later? These are fair questions, and the answers are practical, behavioral, and surprisingly doable. They rest on a handful of rituals and guardrails that preserve optionality while allowing for modest, sustainable enjoyment. But before we move into 3 concrete rituals that protect the vest and an executable plan to graduate from $20,000 to $100,000, there's one more piece of mathematics and timing to lay on the table. The story isn't only about principle, it's about cadence, regularity of contributions, the compounding clock, and the momentum created by side income poured straight into the soldiers. The timing and habit are as important as the numbers. We've covered why 20,000 matters psychologically, why the cognitive bandwidth returns, why compounding needs a core, and why certain traps will kill the seed. You've heard the tactical split and the asymmetric human capital bets that accelerate growth. You've seen the death list. The next step is to turn these concepts into a calendar and a sequence. How to get from intent to 20,000 and beyond that. How to make the snowball wet and heavy enough to roll. That sequence requires choices about cadence, automation, and social alignment. It also requires a few simple rituals to prevent impulses from eroding progress. There is one ritual I recommend to everyone who's serious. Treat the vest like a sacred fund, not because money is holy, but because the freedom it buys is. Replenish it before you buy anything that reduced it. Automate contributions to both the vest and the soldiers so you don't rely on willpower each month. That automatism is boring, and boring is precisely the virtue here. Most financial success is the result of boring things done repeatedly. We will unpack the calendar, the monthly allocations, the automation steps, the social strategies for resisting crab bucket pressure, and the routines that turbocharge human capital investments. In the next section, we will also walk through a concrete 5-year scenario that shows how side income, prudence, and compounding turn a $20,000 core into meaningful wealth without leveraging or speculating. But before we lay out that 5-year plan, let's take a breath and reflect on what reaching the first 20K order really feels like. It's not a finish line, it's a change in the rules of the game. You're no longer playing under emergency conditions. You can plan, you can say no, you can sleep better. The physiology of stress eases. Your relationships improve because you're not constantly defensive. Your time becomes more your own. And yet, here's the uncomfortable truth. The moment you hit that threshold is the moment you are tested. The world will offer you both opportunities and traps. The tools you've built, discipline, automation, asymmetric learning, are what will determine whether the 20K is the start of something or the end. So, what will you do when you reach it? Will you protect the core and let time and judicious investing do their slow work? Or will you spend down the armor on a flashy purchase that only replaces fear with temporary approval? Make no mistake, the decision you make at that hinge point is one of the most consequential behavioral choices in your financial life. It is the fork between ongoing optionality and renewed fragility. I want to give you a concrete, no-nonsense checklist to follow right now, steps you can take this very week. But first, I need to lay out how the cadence works over time. The practical calendar and the concrete 5-year scenario will show how small, repeatable choices stack into life-changing outcomes. In the next section, we'll set up a month-by-month playbook, how much to automate, what to prioritize when unexpected expenses come, the precise order to rebuild the vest if it is diminished, and how to allocate side income into skill acquisition versus deployed capital. Hold that image of the rocket. The first burn gets you out of the dense air. The second burn is where you build orbit. You already know how to do the first. It's slow, steady savings. The second requires discipline and a plan that resists the siren songs of instant status. If you're still below $20,000, don't be discouraged. This is attainable by design. If you're at or above it, protect the core like the practical dignity it is. Let's move, then, into the calendar and the 5-year runbook. We'll map the steps from habit to habit, month to month, showing the exact automations and behavioral guardrails that make the transition from fragile to durable not just possible, but predictable. Here's the month-by-month playbook I promised. Practical steps you can start this week, a disciplined cadence for the next 5 years, and the behavioral guardrails that protect the vest. I'll give you concrete automations, scripts to handle the crab bucket, and 2 realistic 5-year scenarios so you can see how different choices produce very different outcomes. Remember, these are illustrations, not guarantees. They assume steady effort, reasonable markets, and no reckless leverage. A simple monthly routine to get to $20,000. Step 0, know your numbers. For 1 week, track every dollar in and out, not to guilt yourself, but to make decisions with data. Know your net income, fixed expenses, and discretionary spend. Once you have those, choose one of these pragmatic paths depending on where you are. If you're starting below $1,000 saved, aim to save $300, $600 a month. If you're in the 1K, 10K zone, aim for $500 to $1,000 a month. If you're in the 10K, 20K zone, aim for 1,000 pluses a month to cross the finish line more quickly. These are not moral metrics. They're tactical speed choices. The more you can reliably funnel into the vest, the sooner the barrier falls away. The monthly cadence, the skeleton. 1. Pay yourself first. On payday, automate a transfer. If you can save $300 a month, move it immediately to a designated savings account. Out of sight, out of friction. 2. The 3-account framework. Simple and effective. Vest account, liquid emergency fund. Soldier account, investing bucket you don't touch. Skill side hustle account, small fund for asymmetric bets. 3. Suggested split while building the vest. If your target is $20,000 and you're building from scratch, a common allocation is 60% to the vest, 30% to the soldiers, 10% to skill side hustle until the vest reaches 5K. Once the vest is at 5K, move to the tactical split. 40% vest, 50% soldiers, 10% skill. Until vest hits 10K, then 30% vest, 60% soldiers, 10% skill, until the full 20K core is assembled. Why that shifting split? Early on, liquidity matters more. Later, once your minimum armor is in place, allocating more to invested capital accelerates compounding while keeping enough in safe cash to preserve refusal power. A month-by-month example for someone earning net $3,000 a month. Month 1. Set up accounts. Automate $400 to vest, $200 to soldiers, $50 to skill. Total saved, $650. How's month 2-6? Tighten spending on dining or streaming by $150 a month and divert to vest. Now, automate $550 vest, $200 soldiers, $50 skill, by $800 a month. End of month 6, roughly $5,000, $6,000 saved, depending on small windfalls and interest. Month 7 to 18. With a 5K vest target hit, shift to $400 vest, $450 soldiers, $50 skill, $900 a month. After another year, you will be near 15K. Month 19 to 24. Keep the rhythm and you clear 20K. Small changes add up. Cutting 150 month of non-essentials equals 1,800 year. 1 weekend of extra work selling a skill or doing freelance gigs can add another $500, $1,000. Those 2 levers combined get you to 5 figures faster than chasing a perfect investment. 3 rituals that preserve the vest. 1. The sacred vest rule. Treat the vest as the practical dignity fund. If you use it, replace it before any discretionary spending. That means if a master cylinder blows and you use $200 from the vest, the next automated transfer is prioritize refilling the vest until it's back at the previous level. This ritual preserves refusal power against erosion. 2. The 30-day pause for big buys. For purchases over $500, implement a 30-day cooling-off rule. Write the purchase down, sleep on it for 30 days, and only allow one check-in with a trusted friend or accountability partner. It kills impulse buys disguised as rewards. 3. The monthly drill. Once a month, perform a 5-minute check. Balance the accounts. Note one expense to cut for the month. Confirm your automation is working. This tiny habit prevents drift. If the vest is hit, recovery ladder. If an emergency draws your guard down, follow this order. 1. Stop soldier withdrawals. Pause any investing contributions for 3 months. 2. Restore the vest to the prior structural milestone. First $500, then $2,000, then $5,000, then $10,000. 3. Temporarily increase side hustle allocation by 100% until the vest milestone is restored. 4. Resume normal automation only when the vest reaches the next milestone. This order protects core refusal power. If you try to keep investing and rebuild the vest slowly, you risk selling the soldiers at the worst time. Scripts for the crab bucket and social pressures. People will notice when you change behavior. Here are phrases that keep dignity and slow the social drag. I'm in a season of building something long-term. I'm passing on that right now. Short, confident. I'm keeping my cushion intact. Let's do something low-cost instead. Suggest an alternative. I can't back that idea, but I'm happy to help you brainstorm. Polite, sets boundary. You don't need to explain your entire financial plan. A brief, calm refusal is enough. Dignity is practiced through boundaries. How to turbocharge savings with side income. Practical ideas. You don't need to quit your job. You need disciplined, repeatable side income that can be funneled directly into the plan. Freelance skills, writing, design, coding, bookkeeping. Marketplaces exist. A few client wins can add $300, $1,000 a month. Local trades and services, lawn care, cleaning, basic home repairs, low barrier to entry and scalable. Tutoring or teaching a skill, online or local. Micro-entrepreneurship, reselling, flipping furniture, or running a simple online shop. Allocate side income with a rule. 50% to vest until $5K, 30% to soldiers, 20% to skill and tools to grow the side hustle. This funnel accelerates both stability and compounding. 2 5-year scenarios. What consistent choices produce Scenario A? Conservative growth with a modest side hustle. Assumptions. Starting core $20,000. Monthly contribution $500 directed to soldiers. Annual assumed return 7%. Illustrative. Side income reinvested as contributions already included in the $500 monthly. Outcome. After 5 years, the balance in the soldier bucket is roughly $64,000. You've built a real cushion, and the soldiers are compounding. You are now well positioned to increase contributions and let compound returns accelerate the climb. The key here is steady contributions and no leverage. Scenario B, aggressive but practical acceleration. Assumptions, starting core $20,000, monthly contribution $1,500. This could be $1,000 from reallocated salary habits plus $500 from side hustles. Assumed return 7%. Illustrative. Outcome. After 5 years, you're north of $110,000. The wet snowball grows rapidly under steady fuel. This is not magic. This represents higher sustained savings rates and disciplined reinvestment of side income. The discipline here is the hard part, not the math. 2 lessons from these scenarios: you can reach meaningful wealth from modest beginnings by increasing monthly contributions and maintaining discipline. The fastest way to accelerate is to increase the numerator, contribution rate, not to gamble on exotic returns. A concrete 5-year calendar, what to do quarter by quarter. Year 1, foundations, Q1. Track spending, automate an initial transfer. Build a $500 emergency mini vest. Q2, trim $100, $300 month from discretionary spend. Launch one side income test for 3 months. Q3, hit 5K vest milestone. Open a separate soldier account for index-based low-cost vehicles and automate your soldier contributions. Q4, automate reallocation. 40% vest, 50% soldiers, 10% skill. Review and adjust. Year 2, acceleration. Q1, increase side hustle effort. Funnel at least 50% of savings. Implement 30-day pause for big purchases. Q2, vest reaches 10K. Start thinking about tax-efficient accounts if applicable, but avoid leverage. Q3, Q4, keep automation. Invest most incremental savings into soldiers. Start a 12-month plan to scale side income. Year 3, consolidation. Q1, reevaluate budget categories with a focus on increasing savings rate by 2.5 percentage points. Q2, vest at 15K. Begin reserving funds for one asymmetric skill investment, e.g., a 1K boot camp. Q3, Q4, deploy skill investment and track ROI in months. If the skill produces incremental income, funnel it to soldiers. Year 4, optionality. Q1, Q2. If the vest is full at 20K, consider switching to a long-term allocation target. 10% liquid reserve for immediate access, 80% invested for growth, 10% ongoing skill. Experimentation. Q3, Q4. Look for low-risk options to protect accumulated soldiers while maintaining growth orientation. Rebalance annually. Year 5, choice architecture. Q1, Q4. At this stage, you're either close to or past the 100K milestone depending on contributions. Use this year to lock in good rituals, automated allocations, quarterly reviews, and a commitment to avoid the death list traps. Begin to plan for longer-term goals. Home purchase only if you can afford the down payment, maintenance, and preserve liquid reserves. 3 practical guardrails to avoid the death list. 1. No leverage policy until you have a robust multi-year emergency plan and at least 100K in diversified assets. Leverage converts a temporary drawdown into a catastrophe. 2. Complexity tax. If you don't understand it in a 90-second explanation, you can give to a friend. Don't invest. Complexity hides risks. 3. House rule. Don't convert the full vest into a down payment unless you have 3 other supports. A. Reliable income. B. 6 to 12 months of liquid cash outside the home purchase. And C. A realistic maintenance cushion equal to at least 3 or 6 months of mortgage and upkeep costs. Buying early can trap you. Patience preserves optionality. How to measure progress without demoralizing yourself. Weekly, log net worth changes, not obsessively, but track whether your automatic deposits are happening and whether you stayed within discretionary limits. Monthly, check your vest level and soldier balances. Adjust automations if income shifts. Quarterly, assess side hustle ROI. If it's underperforming after 3 attempts, pivot to a different skill or channel. Yearly, celebrate milestones. If you hit 20K, mark it. Take a modest, non-destructive reward, a weekend with friends that doesn't cost the vest. This ritual acknowledges the work without killing the momentum on patience, boredom, and boring rituals. Most wealth and most durable life changes are boring. The glorified parts are the result of 95% monotony. Automation is boring. Dollar cost averaging is boring. Not buying a flashy car is boring. That boredom is the price of option-rich freedom. If you can learn to enjoy the mechanics, making transfers, checking balances, your probability of crossing the next threshold increases dramatically. The psychological trick is to reframe delayed gratification as purchased freedom. The small daily decisions buy optionality later. The ability to choose where you live, who you work for, what hours you keep. A few practical myths to bust right now. Myth: you must be first to allocate into the best fund to win. Reality: for most people, getting money invested consistently beats timing the perfect fund. Myth: a single clever trade can replace consistent savings. Reality: that's gambling, not planning. Avoid it. Myth: if you don't buy a house now, you'll be priced out forever. Reality: home ownership is a lifetime decision. Sometimes waiting to buy with a stronger balance sheet produces better long-term outcomes. The dignity dividend: what changes once 20K is in place? This is where the title lands. Everything shifts for Warren Buffett after hitting $20,000. Not because 20K is a magical number for everyone, but because it represents a behavioral hinge. You move from survival mode to strategy mode. Your cortisol drops. You negotiate better. You sleep more. You take risks that are deliberate rather than desperate. The short course, the networking event, the quiet side gig that becomes a new career. You also gain the rarest commodity: time sovereignty. Time sovereignty is the ability to choose what your days look like, with less mandate from immediate financial need. That freedom changes relationships, preserves dignity, and expands real options. Richness is not only dollars, it is the capacity to live with fewer alarms and more agency. A final practical checklist you can use today. 1. Set up 3 accounts: Vest, liquid, soldiers, investing, skills, human capital. 2. Automate your first transfer the day you get paid. 3. Implement the 30-day pause on purchases above $500. 4. Commit to one side hustle test for 90 days and funnel the proceeds per the allocation plan. 5. If you are already at 20K, protect the vest. Set a rule to replace any withdrawal before discretionary spending. 6. If you are below 20K, choose a monthly cadence you can sustain for 1 year and stick to it. The real question now: what will you sacrifice concretely? This is the behavioral hinge. Pick one thing you will give up for the next 6 months. No excuses. It can be one of these examples: no new clothes, no unnecessary subscriptions, or 2 weekend shifts a month in a side gig. Make it specific, measurable, and public. The close: a challenge and a promise. Everything truly does shift when you hit that $20,000 fulcrum. The rocket stops fighting only to begin plotting higher orbits. The physics of your life change from scramble to strategy. You get refusal power, restored cognitive bandwidth, and a compounding engine that finally matters. Now, it's your move. Declare one concrete sacrifice you will make for the next 6 months and write it in the comments. Tell us where you stand today. $0, 1K, 1K, 10K, 10K, 20K, or 20K plus, and state the one habit you will adopt to protect the vest. Come back when you hit $20,000 and update the thread. Make it public. Accountability matters. I'll leave you with a last image: the rocket has left the thickest air once. It still needs steady burns, good navigation, and discipline. The first big burn is the hardest. Protect your core, feed the soldiers, invest in skills, and avoid the pits. If you do, everything shifts, not because of a single lucky trade, but because you built escape velocity with patience and purpose.